Welcome into the Fade. I'm Clay Travis. He's Todd Furman. You might not be able to see him because for some inexplicable reason he is wearing camouflage. Maybe he's trying to hide.
I'm trying to blend in. I'm trying to blend into my surroundings here.
He's trying to hide from all the bad picks he's had so far in this college football and NFL season. Although, to be fair, Furman, you're not on Fox Bet Live right now. But the run that Cousin Sal is on, losing-wise, he's down almost $12,000 so far this year on the show.
Hold on 1 second, though. Hold on 1 second, and I'm not fully up to speed on the new rules since I decided to take my talents elsewhere. Weren't you guys only given $10,000 for the season? How is he down $12,000? Like, how is this working?
They had to call an audible and get him more money. He then bet all in on Amanda Nunes, I think it was, right? I'm not a huge UFC person, but he lost all of his money that he's almost got on Amanda Nunes now, too. So, I mean, this is going to be a fun show. It's going to be wild. So, encourage people. Yeah.
I want to know, is he pulling a bigger tank job on this season of Fox Bet Live than Urban Meyer's pulling in Jacksonville? Is he just trying to do everything he can to get himself kicked off the show? Like, what's going on here? Eventually, it's going to just be you and Alex Curry. That way, by default, you become the season 3.5 champion. The first time in the illustrious Clay Travis history.
I got to say, by the way, we got a lot to get into with the NFL. But I've watched a lot of Jacksonville Jaguar Tennessee Titan games. I understand a lot of people out there are like, what are you doing with your life that you've watched pretty much every Jags-Titans game for the last 20 years? And I totally understand everybody out there saying you'll never get back those hundreds of hours that you've spent watching those games. Even by Jags-Titans standards, Sunday's Jags-Titans game was a bad game. I mean, I know the Titans won 20-0, first home shutout in over 20 years, but it was one of the most boring football games I've ever watched. The Titans didn't really do anything on the offensive side of the ball. It was just basically wait for Trevor Lawrence to throw the ball to you, got 4 picks. I don't know what the Jags' offensive philosophy was. Their defense was fine, but it was an ugly, ugly performance. But before we get into all that, let's go to Monday Night Football. Furman, this is a big game. You've got the Rams going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals, probably fair to say, I think you would agree, the surprise team of the NFL season so far when you consider they're sitting at 10-2 and would be the 1 seed in the NFC if the season were to end today. And so as you break all this down, I am on the Rams. I'm also on the under. If the Arizona Cardinals win this game, effectively the division is over, right? I mean, it would be almost impossible for the Rams to catch them. What do you expect to happen in this game? Rams are the underdog. Over-under, as I'm looking right now at FanDuel as we are speaking. You can get your bets in at FanDuel.com/Clay. Cardinals, 2.5-point home favorite. Over-under 50.5 in this one. What is the line telling us? What do you expect to see in Monday Night Football tonight?
Yeah, what I can tell you is that the initial appetite in this game from professional bettors were to take the Rams +3. I know that number was dangled out there for a very short period of time at FanDuel. And since then, it's been a steady flow of one-way traffic coming in on Arizona because of that gaudy record that you mentioned. And there's no doubt when you go from top to bottom in the National Football League this year, I mean, Arizona has to be the biggest surprise because they were picked by many to finish in last in what was supposed to be the most competitive division in all of football in the NFC West. And it really hasn't disappointed, I guess, other than the Seahawks, who have underwhelmed. Of course, they played a long stretch this year without Russell Wilson. But credit to Cliff Kingsbury and Vance Joseph for getting this team to be dynamic on the offensive side of the ball. And I think their defense has been the real pleasant surprise. What is interesting when you look at the way this Rams-Cardinals series has played out, I mean, up until that 37-20 win where Arizona upset the Rams earlier this year as a 3.5, 4-point underdog, Sean McVay had mastery over the Cardinals. He'd won and covered in 8 straight games by an average margin of victory approaching 7+. When you look at the way the Rams have performed, they went winless in the month of November. They bounced back last week with a win against the Jaguars. But given everything you said about watching the Jaguars for a full 60 minutes against your beloved Titans, what does that really tell us about the Rams? I think they have to answer quite a few questions tonight against Arizona, not only for the divisional race, but where they'll fit in the NFC pecking order. And I really believe Arizona has been a little bit discounted in the betting market Now, all that being said, I have the Rams power rated better on a neutral field than Arizona, so I won't be getting involved here because I missed the 3. But I do echo your same sentiments, talking about the under being a very worthwhile wager in tonight's game. I mean, Arizona ran the ball for more than 200 yards the first time around. I think Arizona defensively can sell out to go after Matthew Stafford, knowing that Brian Allen, the starting center, is going to be out. It looks like Rob Havenstein as well. So you're talking about a Rams offensive line down 2 of its starting 5, and Matthew Stafford has been sacked an inordinate amount of time during that 3-game losing streak. So the familiarity, everything at stake, I think you're talking about the winner of this game emerging with 24 to 27 points max. And if you're able to shop around, grab that 51 and go under, I think it's going to be a little bit more defensive-minded than a lot of people believe.
All right, so I'm on the under, I'm on the Rams. Let's talk big picture here in the NFL, as basically everybody's got 4 games left. Ordinary season would be 3 games left. I'm going to hit you with the playoff picture as it stands right now, Furman, and see if you think there's any value on any of these teams, because I don't think it's too early now to start to think about what the playoff picture might look like. Let's start in the NFC, since we're talking about the Rams and the Cardinals, and that's fairly significant. Right now, Cardinals are the 1 seed. Green Bay Packers 10-3, Tampa Bay Buccaneers 10-3. Both of those teams would be the 2 and the 3. Then you've got Dallas at 9-4, the Rams at 8-4. Again, we got a big game going on in the NFC West tonight. The 49ers right now playing pretty good football, sliding in at 7-6. The Washington football team still there at 6-7. Minnesota, enigmatic Viking team. They've led, I believe, in every game by a touchdown or more. Then you got the Eagles, Atlanta, and the Saints all sitting there at 6-7. Where do you see the NFC breaking out? Where do you think value is right now as you think about who might win the NFC?
All right, we can go from the back of the pack to the front. And when you look at the Minnesota Vikings, there is no doubt about it. They have to be the most confounding team in the NFL this season, because nearly every one of their games comes down to the final play, whether it's regulation or overtime, and they can't seem to hold a lead. I mean, they've had a lead in every one of their games this season. They've gone toe-to-toe with the likes of the Green Bay Packers, winning that game outright, giving up a game inexplicably to the Detroit Lions where Jared Goff marched them down the field in the final 2 minutes with no timeouts with that late touchdown pass. So Minnesota controls its own destiny to a certain extent. You look at their final 4 games, a home and home with the Chicago Bears. They'll travel to Lambeau for the revenge game for the Packers, and they'll get the Rams in their own building. So if Minnesota can go 3-1, they're going to need some help. But to rule out them potentially running the table and going 4-0, I don't think is a massive leap of faith, given some of the vulnerability we've seen from the Packers, especially on the defensive side. Now, would I run to bet them to win the NFC? Probably not, because I don't have a ton of confidence in Mike Zimmer. As far as the Eagles, the Washington football team, I'm not buying either of those sides as legitimate threats. When you look at the top 4, though, Tampa Bay for me is the number 1 team, not only in the NFC, but in the entire NFL. They check every single box. And if they get home field going through Raymond James en route to defending their Super Bowl crown, I don't think anybody can go down there and beat them. Green Bay, yes, if the road goes through Lambeau, I think they're going to be a tough out. You never want to bet against Aaron Rodgers. But at the same time, they need Jair Alexander back. They need Zadarius Smith. If they can add those 2 pieces to their defense, suddenly they're much more formidable on that side of the ball. But I think the team that's most intriguing is the Dallas Cowboys, because right now, the Cowboys defense is trending up with the return of DeMarcus Lawrence on a full workload. Randy Gregory, Micah Parsons is asserting himself, maybe not just as the defensive rookie of the year, Clay, but arguably the defensive player of the year. He has been a one-man wrecking crew, and credit to Dan Quinn for putting him in positions where he can excel. This was a guy that they were worried about how he was going to translate to the NFL, because the knock against him on draft day was that he didn't love the game of football. Well, if that's the case, I'd hate to see how good he was if he truly loved life in the National Football League. So Dallas is a team, if they can get their offense in gear, I think is scary. So NFC, you know who the top 4 are. We'll see how the rest of things play out. I think the Rams are the biggest pretender, in my opinion, on that list, given the way they're currently priced in the FanDuel Sportsbook app.
All right, AFC. Right now, number 1 seed, New England Patriots. They have the tiebreak over the Titans at 9-4. Kansas City also sitting at 9-4. Titans have the tiebreak over them. Baltimore, the Chargers, the Colts, and the Bills would be your 7 playoff teams right now. Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, Denver, Pittsburgh, all kind of floating around there at 7 or 6 wins. Then Vegas, Miami as well. Where's value in your mind in the AFC, Furman?
Honestly, if you really believe in long shots, I think the Miami Dolphins are rather intriguing. At last check, I think they were upwards of 150 to 1 to win the AFC on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And when you look at how this team has rebounded, very winnable game this weekend against the New York Jets, which should get them to 500 if they have a healthy running back, because I think all 3 of the guys on their roster have been put on the COVID reserve list, with Phillip Lindsay testing positive earlier today. And then you look at the remaining schedule for them. A date against the Saints, a date against the New England Patriots, and one, I think, against your beloved Titans as well. Right. So Miami has a legitimate shot to maybe go 3-1 down the stretch, get a little bit of help, and suddenly Brian Flores, with this defense that had underachieved for stretches, may be able to throw a wrench into plans. When I look at New England, I think they're extremely overvalued at this point. This team hasn't had a play from behind, over the last 6 to 7 weeks. I think the defense is good, but not elite like they're being advertised. And if you don't believe me, believe what the market tells you. There's a reason Indianapolis is going to be a modest favorite. And I think that number is going to continue to trend in their direction for the Saturday night showdown coming off the bye when they'll welcome in New England. Kansas City, 6-game winning streak. They haven't given up more than 17 points. That's going to be tested on Thursday night, a game I'm excited to break down with you and watch on Fox between the Chiefs and the Chargers. But the team that I think that doesn't get enough credit for being able to really make a deep run because they do have the pieces would be the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, if they beat New England, their future odds are going to get cut. I know it's always tough when you're a wild card. They don't really have a path to win the division unless the Titans completely implode, which isn't going to happen. But that is the team that I wouldn't want to play, knowing that they can run the football, they can stop the run. Carson Wentz, while you have question marks about his ability to win games with his arm, I like Frank Reich as a head coach. And I think if you're trying to identify value in the AFC, that's a team that wouldn't be more than a touchdown underdog against anybody if they have to go on the road. And I really believe Indianapolis is a team trending in the right direction when the games matter most down the stretch.
We'll do a show on Thursday. This is obviously a good Thursday night football game, but you mentioned it. The Chargers right around a 3.5-point underdog at home against the Chiefs, who are suddenly, Kansas City is. I believe they've won 6 in a row. They're sitting at 9-4. They obliterated the Raiders yesterday. How do you see this game playing out? The Chargers are at times look like a really good football team. The Chiefs are, though, right now the favorite to win the AFC in many markets.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're favorites with good reason. Would I bet them and tie up my money for the next 6 to 8 weeks on Kansas City at this point? Absolutely not. But at the same time, we keep waiting for the offense to click in a high gear. And when that happens, coupled with what Steve Spagnuolo has done to get this defense set up and playing its best football of the season, they become a very scary out. And what's crazy about the betting markets, just a few weeks ago on Sunday Night Football, we saw the Chiefs right around a 2.5-point favorite in Las Vegas in a game they obliterated the Raiders 41-14. Now you see them as a 3.5-point favorite at SoFi against a much better football team. But let's keep in mind, it's going to feel like a Chiefs home game. There's no doubt in my mind there'll be a lot more red than powder blue and gold there. This is a game the Chiefs lost at home, so they're going to have revenge working in their favor. And when you go back and watch that football game, it was the Chiefs self-destructing more so than anything the Chargers did to really put them on their heels. The other situation that's brewing for the Chargers that'll be worth monitoring, and we'll have a little bit more clarity on Thursday, how healthy will they be in their defensive backfield? I mean, they played against the Giants with no Derwin James. Asante Samuel still dealing with the aftermath of a concussion. And unfortunately, we're not sure if either of those guys are going to be available. If they're not, you're talking about a depleted Charger secondary tasked with slowing down Kansas City. And don't think for a second that Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid won't hesitate to run the football, looking to set up a little bit of play action with this number trending in that 3.5 direction. I think the Chiefs are worthy favorites there. And I think it's going to go a long, long way in terms of telling us how far Brandon Staley and Justin Herbert have come, knowing that they're going to have to craft a game plan on a short week against one of the best football minds going in the National Football League at this point.
We've got 2 AFC games taking place on Saturday, so go ahead and keep this in mind. The Raiders against the Browns and the Patriots against the Colts. You mentioned the Colts now a 2.5-point favorite over the Patriots, who have won, 7 games in a row, I think, since starting 2-4. The Browns, a 5.5-point favorite over the rapidly fading, it appears, Raiders. Do you
they're
think
done.
either of these lines move very much between now and Saturday?
So I think you could see the Colts number start to trend up a little bit. I don't know if it'll get to a full field goal, but what I can tell you is the look-ahead number at FanDuel last week, and neither of these teams played a football game, had the New England Patriots right around a pick 'em. So it tells you a little bit about the betting market and how things have changed a little bit regarding the Patriots. You did see very sharp money come in on that game over the total early this morning across the board. 44 was more or less the opener. We're now through that key number much further out. As far as Cleveland and the Vegas Raiders, I mean, every time you count Vegas out for dead, they put together a complete effort. I'm not sure what this team has left in the tank. Their offense has left a lot to be desired. I mean, they haven't scored more than 16 points except once, I think, in their last 6 games. That came in the game on Thanksgiving against the Dallas Cowboys, clearly seeing the impact of no John Gruden there as play caller. But I would be inclined to look at that total. We've seen 43.5s disappear down to 42.5s. This time of year in Cleveland, 15 to 20 mile an hour winds are more the norm than anything else. I think you could see a very defensive-minded football game. I think the Browns leave a lot to be desired offensively. And I'm not quite sure what that second half was from Kevin Stefanski and company. I mean, they were extremely fortunate to escape with a victory against the Ravens, despite playing, one of the more complete halves of football we've seen from them, arguably all season long, since that season opener against Kansas City.
Titans are starting to get a little bit healthier. I thought this was an interesting line. I'm curious how you would assess it. A 2-point favorite on the road against the Steelers. That means if the line's held, the Titans with 3 games to play, if the Colts go out and beat the Patriots, would be back as the number 1 seed. Couple of angles here. How do you break down Titans at Steelers? What's the impact if, as Ian Rappaport at the NFL Network reported, Derrick Henry is able to rejoin the team for the playoffs?
Well, I mean, I think Derrick Henry gives them their identity back. And the Titans, to their credit, if they can seal up the division, I don't think there's any incentive to rush Derrick Henry back, even if it means getting the number 1 seed, because you want your horse healthy. I think you've seen everybody else raise their level of play in his absence. My bigger concern is what can the Titans get out of the passing game? Because to be honest, and I know you anointed it the best offseason move a team could make, Julio Jones has looked like a shell of himself.
He's done nothing.
Yeah, and I'm not sure he's going to add a whole heck of a lot, even in a playoff push or down the stretch. But again, the Tennessee Titans lived on defense. Despite that 20-0 scoreline, they failed to get to 300 yards of total offense. And even against a Steelers defense that's left a lot to be desired as Dalvin Cook ran up and down the field against them, they now have extra time to prepare. They've been a very difficult underdog, especially in their own building. And my early lean would be towards the Steelers catching points in that particular spot, although I'm not quite sure where the points come from on either side. So fascinating game to look for. If it got to 3, I'd have to value bet the Steelers. I'm not quite sure the market is going to allow. But Derrick Henry coming back makes the Titans a legitimate threat to get out of the AFC. And it kills me to say that because I know you've already booked like 63 restaurants for the Clay Travis fan club and all Outkick VIPs to flood the Los Angeles market should they be the AFC representative in the middle of February.
By the way, yes, that's all accurate. I even looked at hotels, and it's getting hard to get hotels booked, so I'm going to have to get the Fox people to book me through the NFL
You
package.
could stay on the Fox lot. Just sleep in a dressing room. I mean, step it up, sleep in a dressing room. Bring the whole Travis family. Use your Intercontinental points or whatever the hell you got going. I mean, worst case scenario,
doesn't exist anymore.
Worst case scenario,
on Avenue
just
of the
buy a
Stars,
house.
I might have
just
to
buy a house. Just pony up $6 to $8 million, buy a house, and even if you only have it for 3 weeks, then flip it. You'll be fine.
This Ravens team, they lost.
They're done
got
too.
issues
Done.
with Lamar Jackson. You think they're done? The Packers.
Yeah.
We don't really know what the situation is with Lamar Jackson. He hasn't been playing well. They can't block for him. But the Packers are a 5.5-point favorite. That line jumped out at me. Suggests that Lamar Jackson is not going to be playing. I bet you would agree. That's a big number for the Ravens to be an underdog at home.
Yeah, this is kind of a hybrid price, honestly. I mean, if Lamar Jackson was going to be out there, you could assume the Packers would open in that 2.5, 3 range, but with Lamar's status very much in flux, books have kind of put it in no man's land. They'll see if they can take a bet on the favorite, which will force their hand to move the number out, or if there's a little bit of an appetite for the underdog, it might suggest that Lamar Jackson is trending towards being the starting quarterback. But what's interesting about Lamar's injury is we can't even get clarity on exactly what it was. Some outlets are saying it was a low ankle sprain, which is easier to return from. Some saying it's a high ankle sprain, which we've seen sideline, dynamic playmakers 4 to 6 weeks on the high end. But the bigger concern for the Ravens, no doubt, is defensively. I mean, we talked about it going into the Browns game. No Marlon Humphrey. Jimmy Smith was unavailable. Calais Campbell left the game. I mean, this Ravens team is being held together by bubblegum and paper mache. You look at their upcoming schedule down the stretch, and it really does them no favors. I have some legitimate concerns about what they'll be able to accomplish. And it wouldn't shock me at all if this Ravens team, despite great coaching from John Harbaugh and company, found themselves on the outside looking in if Lamar Jackson missed extended time, because so much of it is built around his skill set. And while Tyler Huntley did lead that impressive march late against the Bears and even get them into the back door against Cleveland, I'm not sure that Huntley, with being on film and teams being able to properly prepare for him, is going to become that dynamic playmaker you need at the quarterback position, knowing how depleted their backfield is.
Well, which leads me to a question here, Furman. Maybe the most interesting of all the NFL divisions right now is the AFC North. Because if you've got an injured Lamar Jackson and a rapidly fading Ravens, I think it's fair to say the Browns have, best case scenario, been really inconsistent and difficult to predict. Same thing is true of the Bengals and of the Steelers. All four teams theoretically alive to potentially win this division with a ton of different uncertainty here. Who would you put your money on to win the AFC North?
Oh my God. I think at this point, I'd honestly probably try and back the Browns, because I think when you look at their upcoming schedule, they'll get a win this weekend against the Raiders, barring some unforeseen circumstances. The Steelers, very much a coin flip with your Titans. The Bengals, they'll have their hands full traveling out to take on Denver. And I think the Ravens will struggle with Green Bay. So if you were to bet Cleveland now in that plus 180, plus $2 range, I think you'll have a little bit of equity that you can work with as far as your ticket is concerned. But their final 3 games don't do them any favors either. And it's crazy to think that the Browns, if you shopped around before this past weekend's worth of results, you could have found them at 7-1 to win the AFC North. Those numbers have been more than halved. At this point, which Baker Mayfield will we get? Can they get Ronnie Harrison and Greg Newsome out there? I mean, so many questions for Cleveland, but this is really going to be a war of attrition. I just can't buy the Bengals of any of those teams because I don't have a ton of confidence in Zach Taylor, despite making the case that of the 4 remaining quarterbacks, if Lamar misses time, and even if Lamar is out there, that I think Joe Burrow is the guy you'd want to bank on of that particular quartet.
What's going on with the Bengals? With the Bills. Let me just put this out there. Last year at roughly this time, everybody thought that the Bucs were done. They won their final, I think it was 4 games of the season, won 3 straight, get to the Super Bowl, won their final 8. Tom Brady is coronated. They are now the favorites to win for a 2nd straight year. Right now, if you look at the Bills, they're 7-6, right on the edge of even making the playoffs. But if you look at their final 4, they're all potentially winnable. They still have the ability to kind of get hot. Josh Allen, really high-level capability there. The defense has been questionable. Do you think the Bills still have it in there? And the reason why I bring them up right now, by the way, they are still the 3rd overall favorite to win the AFC. Right now, Kansas City Chiefs, the favorite. New England Patriots, 2nd favorite. Bills, 3rd. And then you roll right into the Titans, followed by the Chargers and the Ravens. Look, I mean, the Bills still have a lot of backing just based on the raw talent. 3rd favorite to win the AFC, but we're not even sure necessarily they make the playoffs. How would you assess this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Buffalo, they showed me an awful lot. It would have been easier to curl up and die when you face a 24-3 deficit on the road against the Bucs. But for them to continue fighting, they got a play here, a play there, able to force overtime before Brashad Perriman scores the long touchdown on a busted coverage in overtime. Their remaining schedule is extremely manageable. 3 out of the next 4 played at home. They're going to be overwhelming favorites this weekend against the Carolina team that's really searching for an identity. Clearly, the big game will be the return trip to Foxborough that no doubt Josh Allen and company want to atone for what didn't happen on Monday Night Football. And then you finish with home games against the Falcons and the Jets. So I think Buffalo realistically could go 4-0. You'd be talking about this team at 11-6 with a little bit of help. Maybe it's worth betting Buffalo to win the division at this point, more so than betting them to win the AFC. And the reason I say that is because Buffalo, if they're unable to win the division, a money line rollover would probably pay you a little bit more, the route they would have to go through to win the AFC. But from a power number perspective, as yesterday told us in Tampa, where that number hovered anywhere from 3 to 3.5, upwards of 4, the Bills would not be more than a field goal underdog at most against any team remaining in the AFC playoff picture. So if they can solidify their defense, which has been an issue, and I think the absence of Tre'Davious White probably neutralizes some of their ceiling, but offensively, Josh Allen, let's see how healthy he is this weekend. He showed up to the post-game presser in a boot. I imagine he's going to miss some practice time this weekend, but I still think the Bills will have something to say about how the AFC plays out, and I wouldn't rule out taking a little bit of a long shot flyer on them to win the AFC East, just because I think they'll have a great chance to knock off the Patriots in 2 weeks, and I really believe the Patriots go on the road Lucas Oil Stadium Saturday night and lose.
Anything else out there as we get ready for Monday Night Football and also as we look ahead to Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday action in the NFL that you would be playing or contemplating playing on this Monday?
As you go through some of the numbers, I think we've seen a couple of totals on the move. I think the 49ers have shown me a lot in recent weeks. I know the loss to the Seahawks was rather ugly, but that's another team I probably failed to mention in our discussion of the NFC that I would not want to play. I know there's some questions in their secondary. They dealt with some injuries against the Bengals. But when you look at what Nick Bosa has meant along the defensive line, he was all over the place and arguably the most disruptive force in the afternoon slate on the defensive side. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo gets nearly enough credit for what he's been able to do, given all the folks that want to run him out of town. And when we talk about San Francisco's weaponry, arguably the most underrated out there with a healthy George Kittle, a healthy Deebo Samuel, you have to think Elijah Mitchell will be back, Brandon Ayuk. That would be the one team that I wouldn't want to draw if I was one of the favorites in the NFC. I mean, we already saw them have a chance to knock off Green Bay. I think they can go on the road and beat just about everybody, not named the 49ers. So still a lot to be decided. I think the back half of the AFC playoff picture is going to be fascinating to see unfold. When you look at the NFC, I think, 5 teams are pretty much in. It's just a question of who's going to finish in that 6 and 7 spot.
Todd Furman, the Fade, will be back on Thursday, getting you ready for all of the football action. That Thursday night football game between the Chiefs and the Chargers should be pretty interesting. And then, like I said, we got Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday action as we come down the stretch run of the season. Anything else you want to add to the illustrious The Fade audience?
You know what? I'll say for some of the college bowl games, I know we don't get, obviously, the power programs kicking things off on Friday and Saturday, but this transfer portal has been wild to watch. I think all of us are going to need scorecards to figure out where these starting quarterbacks are going, whether it's the SEC or elsewhere, from Bo Nix announcing his intentions to transfer to Zach Calzada earlier today out at A&M. I think we're in for what's already started to be one of the wildest offseasons in college football. It's going to continue in such a manner. And for those folks trying to get ahead of it in the bull market, tread lightly. So if you're going to bet these games early, maybe take smaller positions. I think it's going to be more difficult than ever to try and bet these games more than 24 to 36 hours in advance when you figure out who may or may not be available for some of your favorite teams and especially some of the Group of 5 programs as well.
Outstanding stuff as always, Todd Furman. We will talk to you again on Thursday. If you haven't been able to see him, it's because he's wearing camouflage and trying to hide from some of his picks. I'm Clay Travis. He's Todd Furman, and this has been
You never hide from winners, Clay. Something you know nothing about.
Get your bets in at FanDuel.com/Clay, up to $1,000 no risk wager. FanDuel.com/Clay.